Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us this evening. As you saw, the topic for tonight is going to be on heat training and how to adapt training as the weather starts to get warmer. And so Ashton has prepared. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to be on this call with some events on the side. So I'm handing it over to Ashton to lead us through today. And as I said, I would chime in if I need to, but I'll hand it over to you, Ashton.
Awesome. Yeah, and definitely any coaches, as y'all have anything, definitely chime in and we'll get started here. So I feel like this was the first week that majority of us kind of started to see that heat and humidity creep in. I know Wednesday, for instance, here was the worst, which is usually when we have our key runs. And so it was kind of a wake-up call for us. So we thought it was appropriate time to go ahead and kind of start talking through heat training. What does heat acclimatation look like? How can we adjust training in the heat? And as race season is starting, when is the best time for us to start focusing on getting heat acclimated so that we're prepared and ready for that? So just to kind of start off with what is happening inside of your body. Ultimately, as temperatures are increasing, your body is diverting blood from your muscles to its core to cool yourself off. And so a lot of times whenever we're seeing performance decreases, it has to do with less blood and less oxygen being in your muscles to help cool your body off. So what does that look like? We have dilation of our blood vessels, increased sweat production, increase in our heart rate, fluid and electrolyte loss, all of that leading to increased perceived effort. So just to kind of let you know what's happening under the hood, essentially. So whenever we talk about heat acclimation, there's a few ways that we can help your body acclimate to the heat steadily, so that it's not such a shock to your system. And ultimately, we can kind of get you back to where you would be at, cooler temps and things like that. We're going to talk about how to adjust training, but in terms of just going ahead and getting your body acclimated to the heat, the first thing to do is just gradual exposure. So beginning with shorter durations in the heat rather than just doing everything in the heat is a great way to help you get that gradual acclimatation, but also it's a great way to just avoid shocking your system from just now being blasted with the heat, which can cause increased fatigue and help us, still recover in between sessions without now also having to recover with crazy heat. So a couple of ways to do this is if you have like a run off the bike on Tuesdays, that's usually like 15 to 30 minutes. That's a great time to just kind of start dosing it there. Your Kenyan shuffles, which are really easy runs, that's a great time to kind of start dosing it there. So just starting with shorter durations and then kind of building up from there is a great way to just kind of gradually ease your body into that heat element. Training timing, general rule, 60 to 100 minutes of easy to moderate exercise in warm conditions is really what's going to help acclimate to your body. We're going to talk about really the timing here in a moment of how your body responds to heat training. But if you're doing this consistently over a couple of weeks, you're going to see the most and get the most out of your heat adaptations. And so the first few sessions are always going to feel the hardest. They're always going to feel the worst. But again, as you start to get used to that and your body starts to have those adaptations, you'll feel better. Two tools that are really great to use, especially if you're maybe not in a hot environment, but maybe you are training for a race that's going to be in a hot environment. The first one is the sauna. 20 to 30 minutes in a dry sauna can really help with heat adaptation. And this is a great tool to use also for recovery. And so that's a great thing to use if you're not in a warm environment, but training for a warm race. And then the other thing would be if you are still having to train indoors, if you're riding on a trainer or if you're running on a treadmill, doing some of those easier sessions. Again, I'm going to emphasize on the easier sessions. We definitely don't want to do this necessarily for our key sessions, but maybe turning your fan down or going without a fan. One thing that I've also done on my indoor trainer is I've put on like a long sleeve shirt that's moisture wicking. That's a great way to also just kind of warm your internal temperature up. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, is just warm up that internal temperature so that your body can start to have those adaptations of cooling itself off. So that's a couple ways to go into heat acclimation. Coaches, do y'all want to add anything to that, or anything that y'all have kind of done with? Okay, perfect. So in terms of timing, kind of like I spoke about a second ago, we really start to see that adaptation within the first 5 to 9 days. That's really whenever you're really starting to get into that sweet spot. You're really near full fruition in 8 to 10 days. But again, that sweet spot for adaptation is between 6 to 10 days. So you may have heard that heat training is kind of like poor man's altitude training, okay? Whenever you go to altitude, what's happening is you have an increase in red blood cells. And what's happening whenever you're doing heat training is you have an increase in blood plasma, which ultimately results in a greater cardiac output. So again, we have to have this adaptation period for that to really adapt into your body. So that's why hitting into that sweet spot is whenever you're going to get the most bang for your buck whenever you are doing heat acclimation. Now, one thing that I will say is these results, they'll last for a couple days, especially if you're having to travel for a race. So I always think if I'm getting to a race 2 to 3 days in advance, which is majority of people, you're not going to lose those effects. If you've been doing consistent heat training and you have those adaptations, don't worry that 2 to 3 days is there's going to be that fall off. You probably want that so that, again, your body can feel fresh. It can absorb all of the fitness that we've built in our builds. And it's still, those adaptations will still be there for you. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of your sweet spot for heat acclimation. Any questions on that, or coaches, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, there's 2 questions here, and I'll let you get a stab at what answering it, Ashton.
Okay.
If needing to go the sauna route, how often would you recommend doing so based on the literature? Go ahead.
So I typically, just for my own personal training and kind of what I've recommended for athletes as well, is if I'm swimming, which most of us are, on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, then I would hop in the sauna after those 3 sessions, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If then over the weekend I'm able to get an additional session in, then great. But that has kind of been what I would recommend if you're wanting to do specific sauna training.
Parker, do you want to chime in? Because I know you're a frequent
Yeah, I was
sauna user.
I actually have a few things to say. So yeah, for the sauna, I usually try to do 3 to 4 times a week. That's what some of the studies have said. For about 20 to 30 minutes. Obviously it's gonna vary a little bit. I know some saunas run hotter than others. The sauna I go to is typically a bit on the cooler side, so I like to throw on some long sleeves as well. But I will say you really have to be careful with the heat training. I messed around with it a little bit a few months ago, and I was doing some of those indoor trainer rides with long sweats, and it wasn't hard, just like, zone one even, just like a long sleeve shirt. I'd do it at night and like the last session of the day, and I found that the next, if I had like a hard swim the next morning, I was just, my top end speed wasn't there. I just had a bit more fatigue, and yeah, you really have to be careful, not overdoing it, doing it gradually, and really making sure you're rehydrating well, getting in those electrolytes. What you can do if you want to be safe, weigh yourself before and after, see how much fluid you lose, and really make, treat it like it's a hard session, even though your heart rate may not get super high, heat is just an added stress. And also if you're in a super big week, like training for an Ironman, you really have to be careful with it, because if you're, doing like super long hard rides on the weekends, and then on top of that you're doing sauna, I mean, stress is stress. Your body doesn't know the difference between, you sitting on the trainer or you sitting in the sauna. So just really make sure to take that to account. For example, I've been a little bit sick this week, so I actually haven't been doing the sauna at all just because I know I don't need the added stress of that this week. But if you're feeling good and you're not in the heaviest of training sessions, then I think yeah, all the studies and the benefits of sauna really can be helpful. So, but yeah, just with everything, moderation is key. So don't go all crazy on it like I have in the past. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on heat training.
Cool.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Awesome. So next thing we're going to talk about, and I'm actually going to hand it over to Coach Katie, is we're going to talk about trips for actually training in the heat and how we can make some adjustments there.
Yeah, that's great. And if you've done it, sorry, I've been really sick this week too, so I sound a little bit froggy voice. But if you've done it the way that Ashton had set up and you've like slowly started, then hopefully as the weather heats up outside, your body just kind of rolls right along into it. So that's the goal, that's the plan. Just kind of stay ahead of it. But what can you do? The first thing is just keep it like super easy. Yeah, like just make sure that your body temperature is raising really, really slowly. So when we talk about like your warm up, like really take the warm up slow, like really listen to what your body is saying, like ease into it, keep a really close eye on that heart rate that doesn't spike too quickly, because then you're just fighting it the rest of the session, whatever it's for. So really keep an eye on the heart rate. That's gonna be a good indicator if you're warming up too fast, especially in the heat. And so just watching that and taking the time to warm up and to get into it and to start really, really easy, really in anything. I mean, the running and the biking, I think we think about, but even the swim, like Parker said, like if you've had hard sessions in the heat, previous days, you're already depleted, you get into the pool, you're going to feel it there as well. So just making sure all the way around you're listening to your body during that warm up during the heat, like the hotter months. And then also, because the heart rate is going to be higher, it just naturally is in the heat. Like I've seen that it can be like 7 to 10 beats higher as you go from 75 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So then those of us in Texas that are deciding to train when it's like 95, like it's just going to be that much higher. So you're going to be fighting it the whole time. You're going to follow a lot of your perceived efforts too. Just to see how you're feeling and making sure that you're keeping that heart rate down. Your effort's going to feel lower to keep the heart rate lower, but you're still getting good gains. So you're just really trying to be careful and listen to both of those things really, really well. And then also hydrating properly. This is one thing that I've been talking to my athletes about a lot lately, especially with their big sessions. So if you know you have like a big key session on Saturday and it's going to be hot, you should already be drinking electrolytes like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like front loading that hydration so that on Saturday, you're getting on that bike or you're going out for your run on Sunday and you've already got the hydration like nailed in and the sodium dialed in. So you're just giving your body what it needs even before you get started. It's really hard to stay on top of it if you start like perfectly. Even then it's hard. If you start depleted, it's going to just, your heart rate's going to spike. The whole session is going to be so much harder. And then your recovery from that is just like, it can take you out for a couple days trying to get that back. So front loading that hydration for your key sessions is going to be key if you're doing those outside in the heat.
Good. Good, Ashton, you good?
Yes.
Anything else for me for that one? Okay.
No, sorry. Anyway. So tips for racing in the heat. So a lot of the same things are going to follow through, where whenever we're racing in the heat, we may have to change our strategy a little bit in terms of slowing ourselves down, going off effort, and just kind of being aware of that. And so as you're having those pre-race calls with your coach, or as you are kind of starting to stalk the weather, like majority of us tend to do, whenever we're looking at the 7 or 10 day forecast, just be thinking through that. And it's very similar to how whenever you're doing training sessions outside in the heat and you're monitoring, okay, this was my sweat loss in the heat, or this was my perceived effort in this temperature, just kind of being aware of that so that you know how to adjust your strategy whenever you need to on race day. But very similar to how Katie talked about, Very important to make sure that we're hydrating and staying on top of our electrolytes on race day. This can be in terms of preloading, and then also how your hydration strategy may need to change on race day conditions. So it's something to be aware about. Pre-cooling, this, in my opinion, is kind of underrated, where staying cooler on race morning as long as you can really can make a difference. Especially if you're going into a race where either the water temp is going to be warm, or maybe the water temp is like kind of on that edge. They're still going to allow you to wear wetsuits, but it's still going to be a little warm. Making sure that you're staying cool, because that wetsuit's definitely going to heat you up. So what I like to do is, if I'm doing a hot race and they're still allowing us to wear wetsuits, is I'll kind of go ahead and put it on maybe up to my waist, but not put it on up all the way until maybe a little bit closer. I'll have a water bottle handy with me, and I'll be squirting it down inside of my wetsuit just to help keep me cool before race morning. So that's one thing to kind of help with, just from heat fatigue setting in really early. And then whenever you're out on course, even if you have all of your fluids and all of that on the bike, I still usually grab a water bottle. And even if I don't need to use it for actual hydration, I'm squirting it on me. I'm, pouring it on my helmet. Usually there's like a little spot where you can kind of squirt into your helmet to cool yourself off whenever you're on the run, grabbing water, towels. Also using the shade on the course. Like if you are running and there's one side that's shaded and one side where you're just blasting in the sun, go run in the shade. Like there's usually a pretty good temperature difference in the shade versus the sun. And I'll tell that to athletes if I see them on course, like run in the shade, take advantage of that. And so just being smart and kind of looking for opportunities to where if you are able to cool yourself while you are out there on the course, you're taking advantage of those.
Ashton, can I say something about racing?
Yes.
Okay. Just jumping in for the cooling stations. One thing that Natasha has taught me that I do every race, and that I really hammer with my athletes with warm weather races, is they'll always have the baby pools of ice or the trash buckets of ice. And so I literally will carry ice from aid station to aid station, and the ice just like melts down your arms and it hits those those kind of pressure points. It also gives your brain something else to focus on besides the heat. And so, yeah, taking those cooling aids from those stations, like it's worth the couple seconds you're leaning down to grab the ice or grab the cup of ice to cool you down to keep going. So that's one thing that I would definitely just take advantage of that. And then also when you're running out of T2, a lot of times they'll have sunblock stations too, and that's a big one for staying cool also. And that kind of goes along staying in the shade, protecting your skin out there. So let yourself get lathered up before you get out onto the run course. So those are just two things I was going to say about the cooling stations.
Yeah, no, that's great. I always, you can always hear me on a race course because I have ice just packed down my kit, and you can just hear it. And I think that's a great sound. That means that we're doing what we need to do. So definitely taking advantage of what's out there for you. Natasha, did you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, is this the end of the presentation? Because then I'll
Yes.
add kind of things we've missed. Not missed, but just reiterate, which is very important. So when you are racing, you need to know your heart rate. What is the heart rate range that you're going to be at? Be it the cap, you don't want to go over it, and then the bottom as well. So like for me, when I'm doing an Ironman, I know based on experience, and look, it's going to actually go higher the more fitter you get and the more experience you get. But for the longest time, I knew I could race between 145 to 150 heart rate in an Ironman and sustain that. So as soon as I went over 150, I knew, hey, I need to back it down because of the heat and everything else. No matter what the power is saying, what the pace is saying, I don't go off any of that. Heart rate rules, especially in hot and humid conditions, over pacing. Okay. And that goes for the swim as well, guys. Ironman Texas, if you are in a wetsuit, you're going to get overheated in your wetsuit because the water is so warm, and that might make you slow down because of it. So don't push through what you think you should be doing. Pay attention to the fact that you're overheating and slow yourself down. You're going to finish off much stronger. So know what those numbers are, stick to it. The way I also said, if you need to know your bottom, is because just say, I know I can hold like 140 to 150, but a lot of the times in an Ironman, you start to lose focus, you stop to fuel, and all of a sudden your heart rate starts to plummet. Then you know that, oh, I need to hydrate, fuel, focus, and bring myself up to the peak potential I can hit for this race. Quite often, I actually see that in these races throughout, the heart rate starts to dip down. Then we talked about cooling through bottles. Make sure I always have a lot of ice in my water bottles when I'm drinking it before the race. But something that I have done, if I know it's going to be a hot race, I will freeze my water bottles the night before, and that will be on my bike. And by the time you get to your bike, it's a slushy and it is great, you know, midway through the bike. So maybe it's that second bottle that you're hoping to hit. It's frozen. That is something you can do. And especially your special needs. You don't want to get to your special needs if you're using it and it's warm water bottles. So rather freeze those the night before. And then the other thing, we talked about water, throwing it on our head. So when you go through an aid station on the bike, and I just want to reiterate what Ashton said, grab a water bottle, fill up your front hydration, but leave a little bit and pour it all over you to bring your body temperature down. But then when you get to the run, you need to go into the run aid station with a plan of attack on how to get as many cups in your hands as possible. If you watch the pros, they're grabbing honestly 5 to 6 cups. And then I watch the age grouper and it's 1 cup. You need to grab 1 on the head, in the mouth, on the head, in the mouth, because you're just losing so much water that you're not keeping up with your sweat rate if you are taking 1 cup every mile, right? So just go have your hands open, make sure you take as much as possible, use it to cool yourself, and that will help you through the race. Okay.
Perfect. That was pretty much all we had. Does anyone else have any questions related to this training, racing, or otherwise? Alex always overheats at Ironman Texas Swim. Been there, done that. I'm sure many of us can relate.
Yeah, coaches, Alex, if you guys want to add anything that I may have missed.
I've been getting a lot of questions about the Amias headbands, so I figure I might as well touch on it because so many athletes have been asking me lately. Obviously, it's personal preference. I find that it does work. If you watched Miami, you saw a lot of the top pros are wearing them. Amias does not sponsor pros. They will give free product, but they don't sponsor. So the fact those pros are wearing it shows that they too think it works. So it's expensive, but it's great if you keep it wet. Do we still have a discount there?
I can ask for one. I can reach out, but I believe we do have a discount code to get 10 to 15% off. So I'll reach out.
I mean, it's a nice to have, right? It's expensive. It's not make or break, but it helps.
Awesome. Thanks, Alice. Anyone else?
I think for me, I had problems cramping. I grew up in California where it was cooler, and then came out to Texas and started racing out here. So cramping, there's quite a bit of staying on top of your salt, and nutrition is most of it, but also trying to stay cool and not trying to overhydrate with just water. So make sure you're taking down raw nutrition, raw endurance, and making sure you have the water and salt as needed as well. So that was a big one for me because I could get away with it in California, but Texas racing is just an entirely different animal. So this is all of these lessons, everything brought up by Natasha, Alice, and Ashton today are things I had to learn the hard way. So I'm taking notes myself just to remind myself before these races. It's like, oh yeah, it's hot, like freeze your water bottles. Like that's such a simple thing to do, but it's such a big deal. So that's all I got. Thanks, guys.
And if I can add one more thing, in cooler temperatures, you can get away with, I would say, nutrition mistakes, but also you're not likely to get as dehydrated when it's cooler. Whereas when it's hot, like Ironman Texas 70.3, you're sweating much more. And if you get behind on your hydration, you are likely to have GI distress that you didn't think you were going to have. So we could give you the perfect product for fuel, but know that if you get dehydrated, that the product is not going to work for you. You are going to have gut distress. You are going to want to throw up. And so again, adjusting your nutrition plan, if you just take more hydration, you're great. But if you do get behind in hydration, which is usually a recipe for disaster. So I'll just really say, please do not get behind in dehydration. Then you need to back off the calories. You can't keep pushing calories. And if you get to a point in a race like Texas, we see it all the time, where your stomach, it just feels full, or you feel like you're going to throw up. Well, that's because that mismatch has happened. The fluid balance of like, you didn't drink enough, you're taking all these calories. So back off the calories, try to up the hydration, and you should get back to it. And then the final thing I'm going to say is when you get out of the water of Ironman Texas, you are dehydrated. A lot of you are swimming an hour to an hour and a half in a wetsuit and you are sweating. You need to make up for that as quickly as possible. So I always, especially as you're easing into the bike, you're trying to bring that heart rate down, race really hasn't started for you. I try to drink as much as possible to make up for the fact that you just didn't drink anything for the last hour and a half. Okay. And that will set you up for major success. Okay. Anything else, Ashton? I'll let you close it out.
No, that's all we had. Start now. I mean, now's the time to kind of start preparing for what's ahead, especially in Texas. It gets hotter and hotter every single year. So, and with race season right around the corner, the better prepared we can be, the better you're going to feel on race day.
Awesome. Yeah. And I just had one question. Thanks, Ashton. G said salt. Yeah, there's multiple kinds of salts out there. A lot of our athletes actually have been taking sodium citrate. You can buy it on Amazon, and it's just a lot easier on the gut. It doesn't taste as salty. And so you can add that. But again, for the longest time, we supplemented with salt, with like base salts. We're actually coming out with our own, which is a mix of sodium citrate and sea salt. But that's literally pink salt that you could just kind of add. But do know it can be hard on the stomach, especially if you're not by an aid station, you're not drinking water with it. But don't be anyone on this team, be it Ironman Texas, where you don't have supplementary salt with you. You need it for yourself. You need it in case you drop it. You need it in case one of your 100 teammates runs by and they are in trouble. Have extra salt and save their day. Ironman Texas is a mess every year. The amount of people walking by cramping is just a joke. And I feel like we do well because we are prepared. So please be prepared.
I literally drop my base salt every single race, and I'm so happy when it's my special needs. So like, put it in your special needs bag, put multiple on your bike, and put multiple for your run. Every single race, somehow I drop it and I don't realize I've dropped it. So yes to what Natasha just said. Have it.
Yeah, I've learned that way too. And then Braden asked, when is the raw salt coming out? We are desperately trying to have it ready for Ironman Texas, where we can give it to you. Those little vials and putting labeling on those little vials, the way we wanted to do was more complicated than we would like to admit. So there was just a delay on that, but we're working hard to get that out. And then our electrolytes are like Alex wrote, like a baseline is 1,000 milligrams per hour and usually goes honestly up from there. And we're coming out with 1,000 milligram per hour electrolyte that is sea salt and citrate. And I hope to have it ready for Ironman Texas for you guys as well. So, okay, it's time. You guys, thank you so much, Ashton, Katie, Alex, Alice, Parker, everyone who contributed. Thanks for being on this call. We will see you next week. Texas 70.3 race recon, I believe it is, right, Ashton? Okay, and Ironman Texas will be coming soon after that. Bye, you guys.